Welcome to the Vamos Tech Talks with Matt and Bibi. I'm your host, Matt.
And I'm your host, Bibi. In this episode, we sit down with Matt Biilmann, co-founder and CEO of Netlify, to explore one of the biggest shifts in the history of tech.
I really enjoyed our conversation as we explored what AI means for the future of software development and how it will dramatically change the build versus buy story for software.
We talk about the origin story behind Netlify and why decoupling the front end changed who gets to build software and how front end developers went from not real engineers to driving the modern web.
This was a really interesting episode. I'm excited to share it with everyone.
Matthias Biilmann, thank you for sitting with us today. To get us started, did you have a light bulb moment for Netlify?
So I would say in some ways, yes, in some way, no. It wasn't like one specific moment, but before I started with Netlify, I was building a multi-tenant cloud-hosted CMS called WebPop that was had a lot of interesting ideas in it. It had like serverless functions in Node in 2010, which was like a lot earlier than anybody else were doing this kind of stuff. But it was still like a normal, like monolithic application that bundled together like a whole opinion about like how you would write the actual front-end code and like the system for fetching content and doing the back end and everything, right? Like, and I think the light bulb moment was sort of like, hey, there's an opportunity to completely decouple the actual front-end web experience layer, right? Like I'd been in like this CMS and developer tool space for a long time, and we had always been working on separating the concerns of kind of like structure design and templates from like content and backend code. And I thought, wait, we can separate them completely, right? Like we can really turn like the front-end web UI into a separate application that lives in its own repository, that has its own workflow and that's like separate for the backend. And it was right. Like I started really building that belief sort of like in 2013, which was the time where like Contentful, for example, raised their first little seed round in Berlin. And where there was like the first kind of like, there was talks about the API economy and so on, right? Like, and I started really building this belief that, okay, like that side of things makes sense. It makes sense that we're going to turn more and more functionalities into self-standing APIs that we can like plug together. But then it also makes sense that the actual app or the actual UI or the actual website becomes its own layer. And in that way, like at that time, if you think back to the world in 2013, the way you would build any project for the web was typical like a monolithic application in like WordPress or Drupal or Ruby on Rails or Java Spring or something where like templates and backend logic would all live in the same app. And at that time, front-end developers were not really seen as real developers. Like a front-end developer at that time was typically seen as someone that would take a Photoshop file and slice
like a marketing person, really.
Like
putting a WordPress template up, or
not even that. They would more be seen as like you would give them a design from Photoshop, they would slice it into HTML, CSS, and then you would hand that to an actual developer, right? Like to a real developer that would integrate that into WordPress or Ruby on Rails or whatever you use to build the actual app with, right? Like, and make it work for real, right? Like, and I think one of my insights was that, like, that was a bit of this aha moment, was like, hey, if you slice off the front end and decouple it from all the data access and all the business logic and so on, then there's no reason that these front end engineers can't actually like build whole applications there, especially as like backend kind of commoditized because you have like ready-made APIs for content, for search, for payments, and so on, right? Like. And that was kind of like the aha moment that led to start building towards Netlify. And today, like today we then have like, today we have about 17 million JavaScript developers, right? Like, and no one, like they're definitely real developers. They are paid like real developers. They're creating a lot of value, right? Like, in that, like, architectural shift has mainly played out, right? Like today, the standard way of building new web projects is like a self-standing front-end layer decoupled from the back end. But that wasn't necessarily as obvious back in 2013 when I sort of like first had that aha moment of like this is going to happen.
So can I ask, I know this might not be around anymore, but I did a bit of reading up on Jamstack.
Yeah.
And I really like the concept of, I think that's what you're leading towards back then, breaking it apart. And,
decoupling. Yeah. I mean, because that was the next realization, right? Like that there was a bunch of different trends going on at the same time, right? Like there were people at the time talking about the API economy. There was like headless, very first headless CMSs were coming out. There were like the early front-end single page application frameworks like Ember and Sprout Core and Angular was getting started and so on, right? Like there was there's static site generators with like at the time it was like Jekyll and Hugo and so on, right? Like, and there was all these front end build tools starting to emerge like Gulp and Grunt and so on, and all of these were just seen as like disparate, like different things happening at the same time. And I think that was the other like realization that this is really like this whole front end technology of having a build step and outputting an app or a site that you can deploy something that's kind of like coming together. And I at the time I convinced one of my good friends back from Denmark, Chris, to come that this was a real thing and that this was going to happen, and to come like to stop having a well-paying job back in Denmark and like sell his apartment and move to the Bay Area with his family and stop having a salary so we could go build this, right? Like and one of the things he was sort of saying immediately was like, this, what you're telling me about is kind of like a new category, but no one has given it a name. We need to call it something, because otherwise we can't even talk about it. And that led me to then coin the term Jamstack as like a way of giving name to all these disparate things and say like this is actually like one architectural shift from monolithic application to decoupled front ends that talks to APIs and services.
That must have been challenging, the new category. We were watching a talk today where they were talking about talking to investors, and if they're like, most of the time you're not doing a new category, you're doing something where there's competitors already. They want to know how many competitors there are. But if you're doing a new category, they're like, oh my goodness, you've got to do a whole new set of work just to categorize yourself.
It's funny, if I shared you our early Series C deck and Series A decks and so on, we were full on doing category creation, but the word Jamstack was nowhere to be seen in those decks, or almost nowhere, right? Like, because we really believed at the time that we need to build a category across the industry to get this to take off and so on. But in that early days, we were like, if we show up and say like, we're building this Jamstack thing, they will look at that category right now and say like, this is a really small category, right? Like, who cares, right? Like, so we kind of have to, in the first decks, position us away from like, we just show our traction and what we were building and how valuable the product was in itself. And then in the Series B and C and D, the category became really important, because now it was starting to really be a real thing, and we had like free global conferences and all this stuff and meetups all over and so on, right? Like, and suddenly it really like acted in our favor. But actually in those early rounds, we didn't mention the Jamstack category at all, because we wanted to like not seem too weird in that regard.
I love that. I'm curious, and I want to explore a little bit more about that moment in time.
Yeah.
So when you were coined that term and you were trying to get traction, right? Sometimes it can be really hard to keep going when you have something entirely new. Maybe some people don't believe in you. And I'm just really curious, like, what kept you going? Or did you just absolutely knew it was going to happen? Or how did you navigate that?
Yeah. I mean, and I should say, like, I started Webpop in Spain in the start of 2010, right? Like, and then in 2013, I was like, in the process of moving to San Francisco. I had moved in 2012, right? Like I was in San Francisco. I had gotten web up to around 100K ARR, but it was a little stuck there, and I had no more funding left. I had to just chug along on what was in the bank. I had to live for like a $3,000 a month with my wife at the time in San Francisco, which anyone who knows San Francisco will know is not that much, right? Like,
Wow,
I had to grind by, and I think everybody were kind of telling me, look, it's kind of time to call it, right? Like, this is not working. And I started like looking for like what's going to be the inflection point that's going to make it work. And I got this realization that I really think there's like a major change in the whole ecosystem. I think we're right in front of like a paradigm shift, and I think I can play a role there. So let me try to really lean in and play a role there, right? Like, and then in the beginning started to get some real signal, just enough signal from users being excited that I just had to believe that this is definitely happening, and I need, like, I can't just walk away and wonder, like, what if I had leaned in, right? Like, so I think there was this, like, belief that my insight in the paradigm shift was right. And then I'm also just incredibly stubborn, right? I just, like, that's also part of this, right? Like, then obviously, like, I also managed to convince then Chris to, like, I started talking to him at the end of 2013 in another really, I mean, he my co-founder at the time, he got diagnosed with Hodgkin's lymphoma cancer, right? Like, and had to go through chemo and radiation therapy. And I flew back to Denmark to hang out with him. He was one of my old high school friends, and I both talked a bunch about this category shift and everything happening, and we both kind of got excited about it, but also he was like, had to first figure out if the radiation therapy worked and everything, right? Like, and I think that was another part of it. He came out on the other side of that and then kind of called me and was like, hey, I mean, I've really been thinking about, like, what do I want to do, right? Like, I have a good job and everything, but what do I really want to do? And, like, should we do something together? And, like, he came and joined, and that gave an extra energy boost. And then we started building together. We launched Netlify. The first year of Netlify, we did get, like, at that point, it was very evident that we were getting real traction, right? Like, that we could see that there was something very real happening. And at the same time, like, we were two strangers in Silicon Valley. We didn't have a big network or anything. Like, we had to bootstrap the first year, like, scrape by still on, like, the revenue we were getting and so on. The first round of funding we raised was definitely, like, by far the hardest of anyone. We got a lot of no's. We got a lot of people back in 2015 saying, like, why are you building a thing for the web? Like, everything is social media and mobile applications now. Like, why are you even bothering, right? Like, we got a lot of people saying, like, this thing with front-end developers, they're not even real developers. They're all just hobbyists and so on. Like, why are you building for that audience, right? Like, they're never really going to monetize or anything, right? Like, we got a lot of rejections. And again, I think there was just, like, this fundamental belief that this is, like, a real paradigm shift happening. Like, if people don't see it, it's their fault. I see it, right? Like, and then being very stubborn.
Well, I get, would you say that they were sort of, the feedback was they felt like you're reinventing the wheel and saying this is the old way of doing things, the new way is going? Like, I remember back then, I think it was around 2010, Microsoft was saying we're going mobile first sort of thing. Yeah. And web was sort of like, everything was going to be apps, right?
Wired had a big headline, like, I think it was like 2012 or so, right? Like, the death of the web or something like that. Or it's like, and there was definitely a sense, right? Like, but it was also like, we had this sort of the opposite perspective that the web is the only truly open platform we have, right? Like, that has no owner. You can buy a domain and you can decide what goes there. There's no
marketplace.
There's no marketplace. Yeah. You don't have to go in some app store, right? Like, it's a fully distributed system, and the browsers are yes, in some ways there's, like, owners in those, but there's no, like, everybody can go build a browser for the web, right? Like, and start something new, right? Like, so it is this one platform we have that's truly, like, open. And we thought it was really important to built for that platform. And we saw that like the reason everybody was writing off the web was that architecturally at the time, like the web had big structural issues of security and performance and reliability, and wasn't that great to build from it because like most of the web UI development was like working inside backend applications, and sort of like the front end part of that was almost an afterthought, right? Like, so it was also a big part of the mission to say, like, if we can decouple this front end approach, if we can let developers build the UI with web native technology, if we can build it in a way where we can run that code directly on a global network with points all over the world, we can make the web like incredibly performant. We can make it much more secure and reliable, and we can make it much better to develop for, right? Like, so we were kind of also of that belief that we had a mission to actually help build a better web and make the web really relevant again, right? Like, and I think we played a real role in that shift happening in architecture. That means that today no one is asking why the web, right? Like today the web is as relevant as ever.
Yeah, you mentioned something interesting that kind of sparked a new question in my brain. The death of the web. I feel like nowadays we might be heading towards something like that with AI, right? For example, lately I've been hearing maybe you can purchase products from ChatGPT or something like that. So I have a feeling that maybe the web is going to change. Do you have any thoughts on that?
So I think for me, it's more like there's a lot of things right now that makes me feel a lot like being back in 2015 again. I think we're right in front of a similar, like even larger paradigm shift for the web. I think that means that it's a time where it's really important to build tools to make the web really relevant again, right? Like I think it was Benedict Evans that had a quote that said, like, every time there's a big platform shift, two things happen. The first is a category of things that are completely impossible to predict because it's a new platform. And the second is a set of things that are exactly the same as with every other platform shift, right? Like, and I feel there's the same, like when there was a shift to mobile, well, bunch of companies would try to capture what happened on the web inside walled gardens that they could own and control and monetize, right? Like when social media came along, the same happened, right? Like with AI, there'll be the same push and opportunity to, like, for companies to try to trap us inside walled gardens that they can fully monetize, right? Like we have also seen every time, like, the web as an open platform fight back and be relevant. And I actually think right now, as I see what's happening in AI, I actually think the web will become even more relevant. And this really have to do, like, again, back to 2013 and this, like, front-end developer, then people saw, these are kind of like hobbyists, they're not really serious and so on, right? Like, they're just like slicing Photoshop files. We will always need real developers. Right now we have this similar situation where people are talking about vibe coding and, like, these new, like, and there's, like, just in the name, right? Like, it's like vibe coding. It's not serious. It's not like a real thing. It's like all these hobbyists that are building stuff, right? Like, but I think it hides the underlying fact that, like, suddenly computers can write code and they're getting better and better at it really fast, right? Like, this is like a really, really big systemic change, a big paradigm shift, right? Like, and it means that you can start doing true custom software development without having to write code, right? Like I see it almost as like something at the level of like the Gutenberg press or something, right? Like where before the Gutenberg press, you had like this class of people, like the priests and the monks and so on, right? Like that knew how to write and transcribe and read, right? Like, and it was almost like there was like always these sacred texts and there was like a mystique around it and so on, right? Like Gutenberg press came along and suddenly after a while, like now we take it for granted that everybody can read and write, right? This is kind of like a moment where we've had until now this like almost sacred class of very scarce resource of developers that knows how to work with this mystic code, right? Like that takes like years and years of training to understand and process and so on, right? Like, and suddenly technology makes that constraint go away, and it's now very like the barrier to entry to working with code is no longer there, right? And I think that'll lead to like a whole new class of software engineers. It'll drive down the cost of building custom software, but it'll also drive up the demand of software. Like every time we've seen it, it's like the same, right? Like when we got that Gutenberg press and everybody became a writer, like one, it doesn't mean that the profession of being a professional writer went away, right? Like on the contrary, there's probably way more people earning a living primarily by writing stuff than before the Gutenberg press, right? Like, and two, it just meant that like demand went up, right? Like everybody wants written stuff, and the same will happen with software, right? Like software will become like custom development software will become way more common. And that I think will happen, that will play out almost entirely on the web. Because like when the development time and the speed of iteration on the apps themselves becomes so fast, the web is kind of the only distribution mechanism that's fast enough to keep up, right? Like it makes no sense if you can code a custom app in 2 hours and then you gotta wait days before it shows up in an app store, right? Like it makes no sense, right? Like you want a URL, you want to just distribute it. And I think like the web is extremely good at that, right? Like I think the universal like runtime of the browser is extremely good for this. I think we'll start having like, we've always had this concept of user agents for the web, right? Like that concept will truly be true, right? Like now we'll have true user agents and very different forms of consuming the same web projects and websites and so on. But I'm very bullish on the web in that sense that I think it's actually like going to be the natural platform for all of this AI-based software development. And it's kind of like the speed that all of this is moving at is going to mean that the web is the only platform that can really keep up.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, actually, I like your analogy of the print press. I was talking to a journalist recently, and he's like, oh, this AI stuff. And I'm like, I love it because I read so many articles now that where the grammar and spelling is really bad. And I'm like, that's their job, right? They're meant to be really good at English or whatever language that they're writing for. But there's so much demand now by the internet for them to put out content continuously. They can't keep up. So the AI is actually going to help them keep up while they still curate and like manage what's going out. But they don't have to worry about the grammar and like the formatting and things like that anymore. So they can actually focus on. I remember when I first got into cloud 12 years ago, we'd call them server huggers, people that still want to keep the name of the X-File servers or like there's like Bilbo server and like Golem server. And we'd be like, no, you don't have a name for the server. And you don't have to worry about firmware updates anymore. You don't have to be at the data center at 2 a.m. in the morning anymore. And you could see they were torn. They're like, I don't like those things. But I feel like I'm losing value. Like I'm not contributing the same, like as much anymore. So I can really relate to what you're talking about.
I've seen that so many times being in like, I started programming on a Commodore 64 back in the 80s, right? Like, so I've seen a few of these changes come along, right? Like, and I think every time, I mean, the only constant as if you work in software is that it's such a new field that you have to learn new things all the time or it doesn't matter, right? Like, and AI is no different in that sense. It is different in the sense that of course, like for a lot of developers, that relation to actually like really being deep in the code is something that like I got attracted to development in part because of just the urge to build something virtual, right? Like the fact that you can do something on a machine that other people can interact with is magic. But there was also a sense of like this being in the zone with the code and like almost solving the puzzle and so on, right? Like, and I can see that there's like a sense of fear of losing that in this new way of building. And there's a sense of fear of losing, like similar to if you were a monk right at the time where the Gutenberg press came along and we were like, wait, now it's not necessary to hand transcribe everything, and what is that going to mean?
No more
right?
fancy colors and stuff, but at least more people can read it.
Yeah. There's of course a fear of losing that status of like the almost mystical monk that can interpret the sacred code, right?
And now all they have is to sit there in silence. They don't have books to write.
But I will say that I think on the flip side, understanding into how computer systems work in a world where it's going to be way more like where a single person can do way more in terms of writing software, and where demand for software will go way up because it's cheaper to build, will be an incredibly valuable skill set. So as long as people actually train themselves in how to use AI to generate code, to work with code, to like magnify their own ability to work with code beyond what's possible for a single human, the current software developers are the ones that are best positioned to master all of that, right? And they can be incredibly valuable, but it does require embracing this new technology rather than sort of like hiding under a rock.
Well, it's kind of like in the cloud space, I see the shift I've seen over the last 12 years is that like I work in the infrastructure space and like pipelines and that.
Yeah.
And we now have the freedom to talk to the business and say, what do you need?
Yeah.
And then work backwards from there. Whereas before, it was like, I'm just fixing these servers so often that IT was an expense to the business, and it was just, we just have to keep juggling the balls, right? But now it all just works. Now we can start actually giving value to the business and help. I think that's why so many businesses now are tech businesses, whether in healthcare or agriculture or whatnot. They're actually tech companies now, like doing IoT devices everywhere and stuff. So
yeah, I just wanted to expand a little bit more on the barrier of entry that you were alluding to. So now that the barrier of entry to software is going down, on a larger scale, like a global scale, what do you think is going to happen in terms of the economy? Because there's a lot of people that are software engineers out there, right? Like overall, do you have any predictions, or how do you feel about that shift into?
So I think the shift I expect to happen, right? And who knows? Should start by that, right? Like this is like incredibly unpredictable times, because it's like I think we're like in the midst of the largest paradigm shift since the internet itself, right? Like it is a very big, drastic change, and it will have a lot of unpredictable effects. But again, I think my thesis is we will have an order of magnitude more software developers building and like much more software than today in the future, right? I think we'll see a very big shift towards building software versus buying software, in the sense that the fundamental build versus buy equation will shift, right? Like today, there's a lot of software that exists because developers are a very scarce resource, and because software projects are very costly and very risky, right? So think about HR software. Most companies today would never allow their people team to say like, hey, let's build our own custom HR software. They would say that's crazy, it's way too risky, too expensive. You gotta buy software instead, and they'll buy SaaS software for HR, right? A lot of that SaaS software is not terribly complicated, but it is like just out of the reach of a people team to decide like, let's hire some developers and build some software here. That's going to change, right? Like it's going to be totally within their reach to say, let's just like, we can probably build a totally specialized version of what we need without like for the same price as we would right now spend on SaaS budget, right? Like, so I think we'll see massive like shifts in the economy away from software as a service towards infrastructure platforms and agents.
Well, you're probably going to see people steal what's already out there, right? They're going to say to the AI,
it's also going to be like remix and clone and spun up and so on, right? Like, and we'll have like our own new version of like open source or whatever you'll call it in that world and so on to make it even faster to build software, right? Like, but that'll just accentuate that shift even more of like, why not build it instead of buying it, right? Like, which again requires more demand for developers. But it's just a new kind of developer, right? Like, and it's different thing. Like, they'll be building things that just wouldn't be built at all today.
Well, you get to the baseline instantly, and then you start building the things that you wish the tools that you had
could do
did for you.
Like, so I think we'll see a lot of that. Then also, like right now, we are fundamentally building the same software we've built the last 10 years, more or less, but faster, right? The next leap is obviously we're going to start figuring out what kind of software can we build now that just couldn't, like that were just impossible to build without autonomous reasoning machines that can do a bunch of stuff, right? Like, and I think that'll change like what we expect from user experiences. I think it'll also change hardware devices, right? Like the reason OpenAI just invested like billions of dollars in a small hardware startup. Who knows if that will work out? But something will work out. Something will change, right? Like we're definitely gonna see new types of devices and experiences to build for. We're gonna see new types of UIs and so on. There's a lot of there's a lot of stuff to be built. And all of this will require builders, right? Like, so I think we'll have like an even larger software industry in the future, and even more software developers. But I think the tooling around that will be very different. I think code will not be very important as like an artifact. It'll be like, again, more at the level of how we think of machine code today, right? Like I don't spend a lot of time in like a Hex editor looking at like output from like my TypeScript compiler to see if like it created a nice assembly, like I don't know, like it doesn't matter, right? And code will be a little bit of the, like in large areas of our field, the code will be a little the same, right? Like that'll change the tooling and so on, but that doesn't change the fact that you'll be building custom software, just working at a different level of abstraction.
What do you think? You mentioned UI there, and we were talking earlier about like the web still being around. But obviously, well, I think it's obvious that how the user interfaces, and you're leading to like Ives being hired by OpenAI. He's going to do some crazy hardware like he did with the iPhone. Do you think, what would you predict is the new user interface? Like I use ChatGPT a lot. It's a chatbot. I see Google's search engine starting to become like a chatbot because I put in, it's starting to feel more and more like ChatGPT instead of the traditional search engine.
So again, this is definitely one of the areas that I think is in some ways impossible to predict because like human creativity will come up with new things, right? Like it will come up with ways of building UIs that we just haven't had before. But I think when I think about what will be common to those UIs or what's the thing that will change in general, I think the fundamental, when you think about human-computer interfaces since the very first computers until today, the core constraint we have in interacting with computers was always that they were like fundamentally deterministic machines, right? Like you would give them a command and they would do something predictable, right? And all of our UIs have been built around that, right? Like you click a button, something's pre-programmed happens, right? Like you drag a box over here and it's there, right? Like you click a link and you go to a page, right? Like everything is like based on
very binary feeling, right?
Very binary feeling, right? Like it's fundamentally the constraint of like predictable deterministic actions, right? Like and that a computer need precise instructions for anything. And what sort of silently happened is that constraint has now gone away. Like computers can actually now understand your intent. And if they have the right context, they can act on that intent and try to do what you want them to do. versus what you tell them to do, right? Like,
okay, so with AI, is Netlify making any bets to it? I know you're like, who knows what the future holds, but are you guys making some bets, or are you waiting to see what shapes out?
I mean, the big bet we're making, like I wrote an article at the start of the year called AX, or Agent Experience and Why It Matters, which is really the bet that like agents writing code, it's going to be a big new type of user building on our platform, right? So the big bet we're really making is that we need to start already now building our platform for AIs, not just for humans. And that still means building for humans, right? Like, because like I always tend to say that there's like two versions of the future. There's like a dystopic one where the AIs don't really care about what we want and they just run around and do stuff, right? Like, and hopefully we don't get there. But in like the optimistic version of the future, all of these agents are doing stuff because some human is trying to get them to do something, right? Like, so that means that when we're building products, we're no longer just building products for humans. We're also building products for the agents that are working for those humans, right? Like, and that's kind of been our big initial bit, right? Like, how does a web deployment and hosting and like platform need to look like if it's built for AIs, right? And the humans that use those AIs, but no longer, like, it's a big shift from like the first 10 years of Netlify. We were really focused on developer experience, right? Like, and on the idea that if we can really build the best possible experience for a developer, building and iterating with our platform, that's what's going to make us win in the market, and it's what's going to enable developers to build a better web. And now I'm telling the whole company our new North Star is AX, or Agent Experience, right? Like, we have to build the best experience for these agents and the humans using them, because we won't be able to have a good developer experience in the future if we don't have a great agent experience. And that's going to be what's going to differentiate our platform. And it's going to be if we can really remove the friction from humans working with agents that write most of the code to shift real, like to build real software in production with like real usage on the other end. That's how we can help build a better web.
I'm curious about the agent experience that you're talking about, because again, it's something new, right? No one else knows what it looks like. In the past, like since the web was born, we interact with it via APIs, right? We make a call, get some data back. But with agents, I think that can look a little bit different. And I have no idea what that looks like. So I'm curious, what does that look like from your standpoint? Obviously, how is Netlify navigating testing? Like, how do you even test?
Yeah, I mean, there's many different levels of agent experience. Like, so internally at Netlify, we sort of have a Venn diagram where we say there's like Netlify's agent experience, which is like how good is Netlify as a platform for agents to use. There's what we call like customer agent experience. That's really about like what our customers that build web apps or websites with Netlify, what do we need to help them do to build great experiences for agents? And then there's what we call industry agent experience. That's really like, what are the emerging standards, conventions, and patterns that we're building as an industry to make the web better for agents? And if we start with our own, like what we've done, right? Like some of the concrete steps that we've taken to make Netlify better for agents. The first has had to do with authentication flows, essentially, and sign-up flows, where today, if you sign up for Bolt.new, for example, and you prompt, like Bolt.new is like a coding agent, right? Like, it's pretty amazing. You can go in, you can say, build me a to-do list app, because like we all love to build endless to-do list apps, right? Like
first project ever.
Note to self: build a to-do list.
yes, and Bolt will just immediately go to work, and it'll like code you a custom to-do list app, and you can give it feedback and do everything. If you hit deploy, it will just go ahead, it'll deploy to a URL and you'll get a URL back. You can go see your to-do list app without any friction, no extra signups, anything. But it'll then also give you a URL to go claim that project on Netlify. And if you don't have a Netlify account, you can sign up. If you have one, you can just sign in, and we'll then add that project to your Netlify account, right? Like, this was a flow we really built with this like interaction between human and agent in mind, where we thought like it's going to be common that the agent want to deploy and share URL before the human even knows what Netlify is, right? So that's a pattern I'm seeing. Like now, companies like Prisma has built similar flows. Companies like Clerk is working on similar flows. Like NeonDB has built similar flows, right? Like we're seeing a lot of companies embracing that idea of like we need to get the agent access to use our software on behalf of a user before the user is even onboarded into our software. Other things that we've done is I think there's going to be a whole important field around managing context, right? Like agents are really good when you prompt them and they have the right context, and they're very bad if you prompt them and they don't have the right context of what you're working with and so on, right? Like, so we've built into our command line tool, we've built a command that will install the right context files for whatever editor you're using, right? Like, so if you're using Windsurf, it'll add Windsurf rules. If you're using Cursor, it'll add Cursor rules. And this is to the other side of Industry X. This is an area where we are trying to work to see if we can figure out some shared standards, because there are now like 15 different formats for context for different types of editors and agents. And it would be nice if we had like one shared idea of like how that should look like, right? Like, but it's one area that, again, at Netlify, we are putting work into like, how do we give the agent the right context to work with our platform so it understands our platform? Then there are areas where we're really starting to think about what does our compute primitives need to look like to work really well for an agent, right? Like, and that's still early days. We're iterating around that. One emerging standard that's really gaining traction is MCP, a Model Context Protocol, that's also aimed at solving the context problem, right? Like it's to a large degree aimed at giving agents context around how to use APIs, right? Like, so like we have an open API spec, right? Like, but if you just take that open API spec and paste it into ChatGPT and hope it can use it, right? Like it won't have context on like how should it sequence different API operations, what should it done once it's done one thing, and how should it accomplish real tasks and so on, right? Like, so that's where we've now built an MCP server that can help agents get that context and use Netlify's set of tools much better. And that's another like functionality that's becoming really prevalent.
When you refer to agents in plural, are you thinking like, do you think along the lines of one agent per developer that's using it? Or are you thinking like agents that do, like each one does a specific role or is really good at one thing than another?
It's honestly mixed, right? Like typically for Netlify, when I'm thinking about agents, like our core audience of agents are agents like Bolt.new or Windsurf or Cursor or Copilot or Warp or Claude Code, right? Like, which is all sort of agents that are centered around writing and working with code projects for users, right? Like, but I think there are many other kinds of agents that people help them do their work, right? Like, and I think we're starting to see, if you think about ChatGPT, right? Like, we're starting to see ChatGPT sort of building in like memory and doing it in a way where I can observe people obviously building like a relationship to their ChatGPT in the sense that it knows them and it has all the context, right? Like, and if you ask ChatGPT a question, it has context about all the questions you've asked in the past, right? Like, so part of my thesis around agent experience is that, like, as it becomes possible, giving those agents that people already are using access to interact with our product on their behalf is going to be important, because they're going to prefer those agents to us building a bunch of like vertical agents into our product that are more random. Right?
Yeah, so instead of getting an off-the-shelf generic one, you've got it fine-tuned to how you like to build products and things like that. Yeah,
and I think like it's funny, the web has always had this concept of user agents, right? Like it's literally a header sent in every request to a web server, right? User agent, and that concept of a user agent just got real, right? Like now we are actually starting to have autonomous agents, like
Literally
consume the web and be new users of our websites, web apps, e-commerce stores, and so on.
I want to bring you back a bit, if you don't mind, into a bit of a more personal conversation. And I love talking about mindset and habits and books that you read and things that you consume. So I want to ask you a couple of things. What kind of books do you read? What would you recommend? Do you have any thoughts on mindsets? Any key habits that you have that you attribute your success to?
I don't know. I don't know. Like I read very varied, right? Like I've way back before doing all of this, I took a bachelor in musicology and comparative literature, and then started a major in cultural studies while working as a freelance journalist. So I read a lot of fiction in general, more than nonfiction. I've always find that a lot of the nonfiction books can often be summarized in a blog post and you get the same value, whereas the fiction books can't. Right? Like it's a real experience, and it's sometimes a way of disconnecting, and sometimes a way of refueling yourself, or like putting yourself in a different mental place, and like broadening your experiences in a way you can do through words that imagines like different realities, right? I read a lot of science fiction. I've always been interested in like imagining possible futures. So that's always something. I do also have a set of business books that I've read and that I sometimes reread, like that I think really good. There's like the Peter Drucker's what's it called? The Effective Executive. Very old, like from the end of the 60s, I think. He's the guy that invented the term knowledge worker and sort of saw what it meant, like when we were no longer doing like manual work, but we were doing like weird knowledge work, and writes really well about that, and has a lot of insights that are just as relevant to any knowledge worker today. And with a definition of an executive, not as like you have to be a leader of the company to be an executive, but just that any knowledge worker that fully owns an end-to-end output is essentially an executive that like can do real things, can have real impact, and like could think about their work in a certain way. So that's a really good book, I think, for company building. The Advantage and the 5 Dysfunctions of a Team are really good books around like culture and management and focus. The Goal, which is like an old business book describing like how to optimize a manufacturing plant, is still like, it's like written in as a fiction book. But it's a book about how to optimize businesses, is still like an all-time classic that I refer to a lot. So those are a few of the books I really like. I think from a mindset perspective, as I said, I think there's 2 characteristics that's helped me over the time. One is like I am to some degree incredibly stubborn when I am like I'm either very, very flexible or very stubborn, and rarely anywhere in between. And I am also inherently very optimistic. Like I do fundamentally believe I can make things work, or I can figure stuff out, or I can make things happen. And I think like if you really want to build stuff, you gotta be a little too optimistic to some degree, right? And then I think I'm fairly good at switching into a different mode when I need to, so I don't get too tied up in like the importance of it all, right? Like I think it's important to also just remember that, like if you're building a company, you're constantly dealing with fires and like fundamental existential threats to the company, and everything is like a problem all the time. But like in the end, we live once, and if you really come down to the basic, like just having good health and being alive is like all you need.
I think for engineering, the optimistic bit, it's always my frustration working with other engineers and being told, no, it can't be done. And I'm like, how about we just explore the idea? Like I'm a glass half full person. So I'm like, what? Does it hurt if we spend 5 minutes now just like entertaining the idea and not just shutting it down because that's the way it's always been done? You know?
Okay, Matthias. So final question for you. What is next for Netlify and for yourself?
I mean, I kind of feel like we're right back in that time in 2015 when front-end developers were about to become real developers, and like a whole paradigm shift in like who built the web, what are they building, how is it built, we're going to happen, right? Like now we're back in that world with like this whole new generation of vibe coders that are just about to become real software developers, and right in front of a fundamental paradigm shift where the whole build versus buy equation is about to shift, right? And my goal is for Netlify to really play an active role in helping the web become like stronger and better throughout that process, and to really enable all these new generations of developers to unlock the power of the web and build really cool stuff. That personally makes me really excited and energized for all the possibilities and all the wild things that we'll see happen.
Awesome. Well, this was a great conversation. I had a really good time. So many insights.
I think I could keep going, but we definitely need to stop. But yeah, no, thanks for your time.
Yeah, this was a lot of fun. Thank you for having me.
Awesome.